Peak season's coming, and if your only plan is hope it gets better than last year, this episode's going to be for you. I'm Jeremy Lee. This is Leadershiping. Welcome back, and thanks for joining us. As I mentioned, peak season's coming fast, and so are all the surcharges, the service alerts, the frantic Slack messages that you might get. But for teams that plan ahead, peak isn't so stressful. Today I'm going to be joined by Lori Bayer. Am I saying that right?
It's Lori Boyer.
Boyer, gosh, I'm not even getting off to a great start. She's the head of content. You're the head of content marketing at EasyPost, correct?
Correct.
I got that right. And you're also the host of a podcast. It's called Unboxing Logistics, is that right?
That's the one. So everyone needs to watch out. You got two podcasters on the same show. It could get dicey.
I am still learning the ropes, so please take it easy on me as we kind of get into all of this stuff. I can tell you're sharp. I've seen some of the stuff that you've put together. You know it all.
Oh.
Tell
my kids. Tell my kids.
Yeah, I know that. Help me with those ones. I've got tiny humans that they are rough. But most importantly, what separates, reactive from ready, all of the goods that people need to hear. So welcome to the show, folks. This is what's going to help us get ready for that peak season. So maybe before we dive into the interrogation and I start batting the light and asking all the tough questions, maybe we do something fun.
Okay, let's do it.
A little kickoff question. So, as I mentioned, you're a pro, parcel pro podcaster. But what's something else that you're an expert in that might surprise listeners?
Okay, this is a good one, Jeremy. Brace yourself. I'm weirdly good at first-person shooter games.
Really?
I'm a gamer, Jeremy.
You're a gamer.
I got to kill some zombies now and then. I mean, I'm also a mom of 7 kids, and so that throws people that I also, sometimes you got to shoot some things. Just
what's your game of choice right now?
Oh boy, I have so many. You love the classics, Call of Duty. My very first game was a game called, my very first shooter years ago called America's Army. It may still be out there. And I used to be feeding a baby a bottle and shooting at the same time. And
that's incredible.
That's crazy. So, next team building night, hit me up. We can do some shooting. Maybe even VR. I love a good VR one.
I have not done any VR yet. I am really interested in doing it, but I haven't gotten into it. My oldest will be going into first grade in a couple of weeks, and over the summer I started getting her into playing the Nintendo Switch. So she's been playing the Mario game. She's got a Princess Peach game. Mom isn't always pleased that she's playing video games, but her and I are starting to have some fun with it. Nice. And
you got to indoctrinate them early. It's a really critical step.
Well, for me, I used to be a skydiver in a much younger life, and that was what I did. And we'd go up, around and around. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of times, hundreds of jumps, lots of fun. Don't do it anymore. It's one of those things that if you're in it long enough, you start to see some bad things that happen to people. But also the gear is really expensive. And then once you start having kids, you don't have time for it. And last thing I want to do is be like, hey, family, I'm going to go jump out of a plane a few times today. I'll see you later. My little one might think it's cool, but she doesn't understand all the risks that are involved. But yeah, that was college life. What I spent a lot of time. So now that the listeners know a little bit, odd facts about us, let's dive into what might be able to help them. So 2025 peak, it comes around every year, and every year we somehow manage to not be prepared for it. You've had a front row seat to so many peak seasons. like what stands out to you about this year versus some of the past years? And I know we're still in unprecedented times.
We are, Jeremy. This is actually, I love this topic. I'm really thrilled that you guys invited me on to talk about it because I have been neck deep in the research and talking to experts and trying to figure out exactly what is going to happen this peak. And we're seeing some really, really interesting trends. So there's a few things I've noticed. First, we sent out multiple surveys to our own customers, but also to people through LinkedIn, things like that, to ask what their biggest concerns were going into peak. And the number one by far is consumer spending. People are worried that with the way the economy and inflation, the consumer confidence continues to be down. And so people have been really worried about that. Interestingly, I spoke with an executive at Forrester who that's what they do is forecast and try to figure out what's going on in the retail sector. What's really interesting in this point is while all the surveys and measurement of consumer confidence is down, people are still spending. The actual spending as of right now, we say we're worried, but we're still putting the money out. So that is good news. So people are cautious. They are still spending, but they might be spending probably a little bit more on some of the boring necessities over the amazing things. So that's one thing to expect as we're coming up to peak, is that spending is going to hopefully still be better than we expect, but it might be certain industries maybe hit a little harder if you're really kind of that luxury industry. We're seeing a lot of shakeups in carriers. So at EasyPost, my bread and butter day to day is the carrier network. And we are seeing quite a few shifts here. For a long time, as the big carriers were pretty much what everyone went with: FedEx, UPS, USPS, DHL, all the big dogs. During COVID, that expanded quite a bit to a lot of regional carriers as, capacity just was really, under strain.
Yeah.
But those have stuck around. And we're actually seeing expansion in the use of regional carriers. So we saw a 40% increase in the use of regional carriers just over the last year. So we are seeing some kind of shakeups there. We are also, one of the other things, and I'll just give you one more because there's so many things. We can't talk for all day, but we're seeing something called microsurges in peak. Okay, so as I've talked to different people, not everyone's heard this term, but basically peak used to be kind of this regular build-up. We'd have our big week in, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, that peak, it kind of stays a little high and then tapers off. In the last few years, we're starting to see a few trends. First, peak season's expanding. You totally hit on that, Jeremy. There are some people shopping all the way in August. I wish it was me as a mom, because that's not me, and I could probably do better.
What would be the fun if you weren't up until like all night long on Christmas Eve wrapping presents and running around like a crazy person?
Right.
That's part of the holidays to me.
It's the tradition, right? So, but what we are seeing are a lot of these little micro surges. So yes, we still kind of have the general peak, but throughout peak season, due to a few different things, sort of the advent of TikTok and influencers, so you're getting these big micro surges where all of a sudden demand spikes way beyond what people have expected. And this causes demand to go up 85, 100%, 200% within a matter of hours. And that really, if it's unexpected, so maybe somebody wore your sweatshirt and suddenly you're being bombarded, or other interesting things that can cause it, weather. Of all things, Jeremy, I wouldn't think weather, but even just a big rainstorm during peak season raises the rates of online shopping 22%. That's just rain. But you get a big snowstorm, you have nowhere to go. You're like, I'm going to get my online shopping done. So those can be hit regionally due to weather. You may have big spikes all of a sudden. Sometimes it's things we could prevent, like maybe our marketing team. I work in marketing, so don't blame the marketing team. But the marketing team maybe does an amazing flash sale and kind of didn't communicate well with the fulfillment centers, and suddenly you're bombarded with something. So micro surges are a big deal. being prepared with your inventory in a way we're not used to. Um, Consumer confidence, what we're seeing in terms of users and buying. And then I would say the carrier network. So those are kind of our big things I see, those shakeups in the carrier network coming into play. So does
I
that
have
sound good?
not heard the term micro surges before, but it makes sense. We
Yeah.
all love our marketers. You all do a great job. I know that I have fallen for that. I'm about to fall for it here in a little bit. When I get a promo and a deal that I just can't pass up, and I've been thinking
Yep.
about something, like I'm going to do it. You guys are in my brain. You're living rent free, and you get my money. But I
And maybe
never would
a
have.
three occur, Jeremy. Maybe it's like somebody's wearing it, then they promote it to you, and you're stuck in a snowstorm. The
I
perfect storm.
it's possible, and like I never would have thought about like stuck in a snowstorm. You're kind of there, and you're like, what am I going to do? I'm going to thumb around online. But now that you mention it, we're here in the Midwest, and it's been just absolutely hot, and I'm talking like 80+% humidity, high 90s, feels like 110 billion degrees.
Yeah.
But we just had a front move through, and it cooled off, and we're in the 70s right now. And I'm thinking about fall clothing, like different stuff like that. Like my mind's kind of like thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, this is the good time of year. I need to like look at some long sleeves, some flannels, that type of stuff. So
Yeah.
that's that. There you go, marketer
We're
living rent
easily
free.
influenced. It's true.
Well, like, what are shared traits you see about companies that consistently crush it in peak? And earlier this year, I talked to some folks about like preparing your tech stack for this type of stuff and how do you upgrade. And it was really talking about going back and like looking at like what your fail points were and like what you can learn from that so that you can put that together. And I mean, everything always goes back to like talking about peak, no matter what you're talking about in shipping. So like, what are we seeing from folks that are like consistently just absolutely crushing it?
I love that you asked that question because that is always where I go first is like, okay, who's doing this well? And there are companies who do this really well and who are managing the tariff situation well and who are managing, the micro surges well. So glad you asked that. We do have like a few common things, and I think it makes sense. The first one is like really agile companies. So hyper agility. Yeah, those companies can reassign staff. They understand carrier allocation. They can move on a dime. And you mentioned tech stack. That becomes like a big piece of it because some of the legacy tech that we
Yeah.
see, some of the older systems, honestly were built not for kind of these micro surges or
No.
not for what we're experiencing right now and can't move very quickly. It's kind of like moving a cruise ship. It's going to take a minute. And so having hyper agility, being able to make real time decisions and pivot really quickly when something happens, that's one feature of just these really good companies. Um, Visibility. We can't change what we don't see.
Yep.
So being able to understand what the crap is going on,
I
Jeremy,
love
in
that you
a
said that.
warehouse. I mean,
One
and
of
it
the
can be
things
anywhere.
I always say is like, you can't change what you are like. You can't measure what you can't see, right? And you
Yep.
can't change what you can't measure. And so many times, like in this industry, people are just like throwing ideas at the wall. They're like, "Let's do it, right? Let's go for it." And then you have no idea what happened. And at the end of it, you're either doing really well or potentially doing really bad. And it's more often the other.
Absolutely. And data is so critical here because you might not even know. I was just talking to a customer recently who was sharing an experience. They're a retail customer and they sell clothing and whatnot. But they were starting to get like a spike. They were looking at their data in support tickets.
Hmm.
Every Wednesday around 3 o'clock, they were getting this spike. And so, like, to me, that's like a like, it's
Yeah.
time to go look and see what's going on here. And it turned out that their like primary carrier, the midday pickup was delayed by 45 minutes, like every week. And so they simply kind of switched carriers to one that had this guarantee, and the support tickets fell. I think it was like 32% or something. So there are little things, there's signs,
Yeah.
and we just have to stay on top of it. You know, you may just think, oh yeah, it's a little bit busy this time of day, but that visibility into knowing what it is so critical. The other thing, yeah, I think so. If we had visibility and agility, um, diversification, we are seeing, you know, having a really good mix of carriers, national, regional, specialty carriers, people who are aligned to different zones, to the type of products you're
Yeah.
shipping. You know, some products are really fragile. If you have certain SLAs you're trying to meet, that kind of diversity piece is also a sign, a hallmark kind of the really strong brands.
And that's not something that's easy. And a lot of shippers,
No.
like that smacked people in the face during COVID,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Like
Oh yeah, big time.
everybody was like, what was it, like 2 years? Like we went home for 2 weeks that turned into 2 years. It's like no big deal. Like we can get through this, but
Yeah,
all of a
Jeremy,
sudden,
I literally had people say that they went and rented trucks themselves and drove their
yeah.
own goods because they couldn't get carriers. Yeah, it was insane.
I mean, I was getting calls that people were like, "What am I supposed to do?" My carrier said, "Sorry, I can only take this much," and like I've got 75% of my volume that needed to go out today that's still sitting here. They're like, "I need. What am I supposed to do?" Right? Like, and that what we're talking 5 years ago, which gosh, it
Mm-hmm.
seems like it was
I
just
know,
yesterday, but also like a lifetime ago.
completely.
The technology at that time, because technology is moving at like lightning speed right now, was not prepared to help people like work with multiple carriers and everything, and so like bringing in that stuff was really really difficult. But there are some leading brands out there that have implemented this. They've stuck with the strategy and they're doing it really really well. Like how are they approaching, or how did they approach the carrier diversification, allowing them to be so much more successful right now and maintain that strategy?
Yeah, there was a lot of hesitation. I felt like early on, we get comfortable.
Hmm.
We get comfortable with what we're familiar with. Maybe I always fly Delta, and so it feels weird to fly American. That doesn't mean it's like the most cost effective for me,
Sure.
right? And so, from a risk management perspective, first, you mentioned that, I think we kind of had our eyes open during COVID that from a risk management perspective, we don't want all our eggs in one basket. And it's really stuck around because it's not just a risk management thing anymore. It's really um, become a way to save a lot of money.
Hmm.
It's a way for you to actually be more efficient, is to focus on different carriers. The ones that I'm seeing that are doing it really well, first, my first advice always is like, don't just go crazy. Let's say you're using one carrier, you're always using FedEx, you love
Yeah.
FedEx. Don't just go and suddenly have 20 carriers. A lot of brands, they carve out maybe 5% of their volume or something to test out new regional, new niche carriers. Um, and so when peak hits, they've vetted kind of some different options, and they're kind of doing this on a rolling basis. So not just a one time like, oh, I'm going to try out and now these are my new carriers,
Yeah.
but continually kind of testing different carriers. I have a lot of people ask me, well, what about splitting up my volume? That's probably the number one question I get. Okay, well, if I split up my volume, then what am I going to do about getting my good rates? Um,
Hmm.
this works really well. So I would say up until like really quite mid-level, not the biggest. If you're Walmart, although Walmart uses EasyPost as well, using a company like EasyPost doesn't have to be EasyPost. This isn't a sales pitch here, but like just one of those shipping solutions that gives you discounted rates.
Hmm.
Basically, we do that negotiation so you get a discounted rate so you can kind of split up your volume.
Sure.
And it is just a great deal for you. You don't have to get your own account and do your own negotiation that way. So make sure one of the things you can do when you do use, so when you have a shipping solution, it's kind of like EasyPost, um, you can compare all the different rates. So we have 100 plus carriers in the network. You log in, and with AI, so cool, Jeremy. I'm like
It
addicted
is.
to AI. But with AI now, you can basically go back, you review billions of shipments, and you can see which carriers might have the best cost or might have the lowest transit time or the highest reliability, and you can compare it to different zones. And we just, the data is out there now, the tools are out there that you can
Yep.
compare all the different things and kind of throw in your scenario. Well, if I brought my own rate, what
Hmm.
would this look like in comparison to this? And so just know there are tools out there that make it really easy for you to do that comparison and to split that up.
They are.
Additionally, with carriers, I would say look at your SLAs. You know, instead of just like, oh, I ship 100,000 packages. You know, what is the percentage of on-time deliveries that you're getting in a certain lane?
Yep.
Those are the kind of things, really digging into those details, as you mentioned, the visibility, so that you can know which of these carriers really is going to be the most effective for you. And yeah, and then just having a good mix.
Yeah.
That's what they do is, you know, if you have somebody who's a specialist in a certain area, you know, maybe you're going to use a certain carrier. If you're heavy into urban area, there's different carriers who are better. So just kind of playing the carrier market to what works for your specific product and your specific goods, and making those comparisons so you can just make a call.
That's like really, really important. You mentioned AI. Maybe I'm actually AI generated. I'm not a real
You
person.
are? Oh, yeah, me too.
I get a ton of questions, but like, what are some of the key questions brands should be asking from your standpoint about their delivery network right now?
So I would think, especially as we're talking about the upcoming peak, look at what your carriers from last season. You know, we all do it, but who underperformed last peak? You know, you've got to have somebody, as you said, look at the lane level data, look at late scams or wrong sort rates, breakage, fees. Okay,
Yeah.
fees are like everybody's nightmare because they're constantly piled on, as you mentioned, all the surcharges throughout the season. Just kind of run a report. Which ones do you feel like didn't perform as well? I would
Hmm.
say that. Make an assessment. Um, Try to do some simulations.
Hmm.
So, can you handle sudden volume? So, when the weather gets weird, when that TikToker uses your product, what would happen if you had a sudden 150% baseline spike to your volume? Where are your choke points? Try to figure out your throughput. What is going to happen, and make sure you have a little bit of kind of surge capacity available to
Yeah.
back those up. I'd also say people really look at your zones. So it's not just the carriers. There's certain zones that may be kind of trouble spots. So look at your different zip code areas. Look for clusters. If maybe a certain cluster of your multi-day transit stuff averaged 1.8 days in September and it's suddenly 3.2 in December, you know, that may be a red flag. So just again, you're looking for those patterns. Where are the weak spots? Which carriers, which zones? And then for yourself and your carriers, do you have capacity built into your contracts? Do you have backup carriers? If not, how are you going to manage those spikes? Those would be my biggest recommendations.
You know, some of the things that I've recommended, or we've started having more conversations, and people are more open about, is if you're a single node location, right, smaller
Mhm.
brands, it makes it really tough for you to reach different places depending on where you're located. And like, unless you're
Absolutely.
dead center in the United States, it's really hard to get out to like all the different locations. Even harder if you're all the way down in like, say, middle of Florida, right? Like, that's a long way up out of there, and then to get across the country. So having conversations with like strategic partners, or considering what I would call like a pop-up shop, which is having the ability to put some inventory
Yeah.
into excess warehouse space where you're close to where like your customers are. But that none of that is possible unless you have the data and you have
Yeah.
the information and the understanding of those trends, so that you can strategically position like what those people are most likely to buy in those regions
All
close.
comes
And
back to that
then,
visibility that we
yeah.
mentioned earlier, right? Like you've got to know what's going on. So obviously, as we're talking through all these different things you can do, very basic number one is, if you don't have visibility, and don't feel bad. If you're one
No,
of those people who doesn't have visibility, everybody has visibility blind spots. Everybody's got
sure.
gaps. Find them. Make sure visibility is your first step. But do you know what's actually going on with all of your stuff?
My favorite people to talk to are the ones that say everything is good, everything's fine, couldn't do anything any better. Like, not one thing, not at all. Are you sure?
We're perfect. No
Yeah,
change is
this
needed.
is as good as it's gonna get. Like, my goodness. Uh, which they, that leads us to forecasting, right? If
Yeah,
everything's as good as it could possibly be, that means that
yeah.
you are dead on your forecast, maybe performing a little bit under it because you had some margin inside of there. But like, forecasting is one of those things. Sounds like an obvious prep step, right? But it's where a lot of peak season plans go sideways, right? Like, you
Hmm.
planned it's going to cost you this much. You have no idea what that charge is going to be, that peak season surcharge or anything. That's not even rolled out until, late summer a lot of times. And then they come at you with, like, hey, this is the measurement period, which again, you're not really aware of unless you have some
Yep.
historical data where you can get an idea of when that's going to happen. So, how are successful teams, approaching forecasting nowadays?
Okay. Forecasting done well is like this beautiful combination of art and science, right? It's like it all comes together.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not that easy as combining art and science would be. So I love how you were mentioning, like, oh, you're looking at all the different cases. I think multi-scenario planning is critical. That
Mm-hmm.
you've got to consider your bull, your bear. What is your base case? Try to figure out probability. You can look at trends and whatnot, but you got to kind of run some scenarios and figure out best case scenario, worst case scenario. And so you then can make judgment calls based on different scenario options. But during peak, especially, I really recommend you've got to be looking a little more real time. You've got that data. You've got to be pulling in your web traffic, order trends, macro indicators that are going on daily. It's my recommendation. Are you starting to see some increases in your web traffic and on your website? That's going to trickle down through the warehouse, and then reforecast. So your forecast isn't going to be a one and done. Oh, I figured it out. We're done. Forecasts change, just like the weather. Can you imagine if they gave us one forecast for winter?
It, it's
We've
going to
got
be
to be,
cold. That's
yeah,
it.
it's going to be cold, and some days it might be warm.
Maybe in San Diego, right? Like, they got the easiest job. They're like, it's just
Yeah,
nice. All right, like, get over it.
exactly. So I also think that really good teams, they work closely cross-functionally. That's like hard to do sometimes, but sales, marketing, ops, finance, the forecasts need to mesh together. Our systems as well. You mentioned tech stack earlier. Our systems need to have a single source of truth.
Hmm.
Sometimes you're seeing different numbers in different places. So make sure that everybody is using the same numbers so you're not getting mismatches
Oh
there.
my God, you're speaking to my soul right now. Like, how many times
Seriously.
have you been in that meeting where each functional group is getting their data from some other place, and you all roll in there, and, like, the leader that is running that meeting is like, why don't any of your numbers match?
Yeah.
Everybody, like, get out of here. Like, how much time and money have you wasted just, like, coming into that room with, like, pure confidence, only to find out that nobody can agree on, like,
Nobody
what is
agrees
true?
on what the numbers are. Exactly. So you've got to get kind of a single source of truth that everybody's working from. Um, so that then you can pivot in real time, and you're keeping an eye on those changes, doing your weather forecast, your inventory forecast, your everything forecast needs to be updated constantly.
And then, of course, accuracy. That's always something that pops up. And it's like, how do you define accuracy, first of all, right? Because, I mean, one group could say, like, it needs to be, like, exactly this at exactly this time and this dollar amount or whatever. But I guess, one, how are we going to define accuracy? And then two, how do you ensure it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you may have your single source of truth. We hope it actually is the truth. We
Mm-hmm.
hope it's accurate. So first of all, if you are, you know, all agreeing on something, let's make sure that you're agreeing on an accurate number. Going that goes back to the visibility piece, and Jeremy, I don't think there's like one super easy answer here on
Don't
making
think
sure
so either.
your numbers are accurate, sadly. But you just got to do some legwork, be comparing calibrate your models for 2025 based on 2024, based on 2023. Human oversight, I think, is huge. Well, I am a massive data nerd and I love data. It can sometimes go off the rail kind of
Yep.
quickly.
Yeah.
A little tweak somewhere can somehow, it's sort of like a railroad train that somebody moved the track 1 inch and you can end up 3,000 miles off of
Oh
your
yeah.
original
1 degree
destination.
at 1 foot versus 1 degree at 1 mile.
Yeah,
That's a huge one. Uh,
exactly. So make sure you've got a little bit of a human oversight, and then just be really transparent about changes, about problems, about issues. I feel like some companies we might want to hide a hiccup that maybe our department made or an
oh,
issue that was
nobody
caused.
wants to make mistakes. Everybody's perfect, right?
That's right. So we have to have an organization that's open to the fact that, look, everybody's going to mess up, especially during peak. Life is insane. There's going to be problems. Make sure that you have an organization that your transparency is welcomed so that you can pivot and make changes as issues arrive, as forecasts change.
Yeah.
Be willing to say, I predicted this forecast and it looks like we're off. And then just get that out to all those stakeholders so that you can make the changes on the go.
I know here we try to fail fast. That's the one thing that we always
Yeah, I
talk
love
about.
that.
People really struggle to understand what that means, and folks new to the organization are like really struggle to like embrace it, and you have to kind of expose them to it. When I think about accuracy and forecasting, I almost use like the hurricane tracking model. They have the cone of
Mm-hmm.
trajectory of where it could go, and the that's pretty much the best way that I can explain it. And how you get to that cone is, you've got your deviation from like what your model might say, but then you have those thresholds that all functional groups agree that, like, okay, these types of disruptions or events or things like that could have an impact of plus or minus however much, and
Yeah.
as long as we're still operating within inside of this, we're good. But we need to know if we're trending towards one of those thresholds, and as soon as you like are on that trajectory, like, you need immediate root cause analysis. Hello, AI, help me with
Mm-hmm.
that. Get that to me immediately, so you can make that correction as soon as possible. Again, like you said, 1 degree at 1 foot versus one
Yeah.
degree at 1 mile. We certainly don't want that train coming off the tracks by any means. So
Yeah.
sensitivity
Absolutely.
analysis, get an alignment of like what that deviation is, because nothing's ever going to be dead on that line, and then just focus on execution after doing all of that stuff. So that's what I look at when we consider accuracy. And of course, it's going to change and
It
something's
is.
going to happen. But you know what? Fail fast. Keep getting better at it.
I love
Learn
that.
from your
Fail fast.
mistakes.
I love it.
So we've talked about some of the hard stuff, customer experience, right?
Okay.
Looking at all the different opportunities and costs, but like the end game is still delivering a great customer experience. I always like, anytime I think about people that are ordering things or shopping online, the Bernie Sanders meme where he's like sitting in the cold, his legs crossed, his hands there. It's like people push that button that says buy, and they're like sitting outside like, where's my stuff, right? Like, we want instant gratification in this country and in this world. So what's like one thing, I guess, maybe more you wish maybe more shippers remember about like the consumer side of peak, outside of like, I want it and I want it now, and don't ruin Christmas for me, and we're always going to shop at the last minute, right? Like,
Oh, Jeremy, I'm totally guilty as well. I think it's kind of funny for us being in this industry because it's not very many industries where we are also our end customer. Right? The
yes.
truth is, we are all buyers, and so we kind of can have a little bit of insight into what it feels like when you order your child's present from Santa a little too late and it's not showing. That was me, right? And the panic, and we get it, but what I would say, you asked for one thing. I could give you like 6,842 things Jeremy, that are important, but I'm gonna stick to one because I know that we're already talking a lot. Um, Transparency is more important than perfection.
I love that.
Customers want to know what is going on, and most of the time, we've got the people out there, but most of the time, data shows again and again that if you're transparent and upfront with people, they get it that problems happen. If you're
Hmm.
trying to hide it or hoping maybe it's just going to show up, um, maybe nobody's going to complain that you said it would arrive in 2 days and it didn't. Um, that is where you run into problems. So proactive communication. So you've got to have tracking available first. So transparency. Your customers, like, what the heck? I ordered some food. I was recently at like a convention center and there was no tracking of the food I'd ordered. And I felt suddenly like, I don't know what's happening. Should I go outside? When is it going to arrive? We are so used to knowing where our stuff is. With packages, it's the same. Over communicate rather than under communicate.
I
Always
love
err
that.
on the side of over communicating. If you know something's happened, your package is delayed, just tell the customer. Send out a text. Support tickets, Wismo tickets, where that crap is my order. Those fall by like 50% just by like sending a text proactively. Be like, hey, looks like we're having a little delay. There was weather in Chicago. We're so sorry. Here's a 10% code for discount on buying something else. It should still arrive by Friday. Boom. Promoter scores up 12%. You manage the experience. The experience and the perception is more important than the actual what happened. So make it a good experience. Make all those negative things that will happen. You're going to have those hiccups. Have a plan for when they happen. How are you, delivering the experience in a way that makes a difference? Studies show that 66% of customers will not go back to a company if they had a bad delivery experience
Oh
during
yeah.
peak. Bad doesn't mean, though, that it was just late. Bad typically means late and it wasn't made better somehow. So be communicative, reach out, let people know, and just apologize. And honestly, it goes a really long way.
I love it. I mean, I don't know that I could say it any better than that. I would say like my top things would be like empathy and over
Mm-hmm.
communication, right? Um, I think we're living in the a world of like anything that can go wrong will go wrong. What is
Yep.
it, like Murphy's Law or whatever that silly thing is? They're
Murphy's
like, oh yeah,
Law is really good right now.
I think prior to 2020, like people were a little less understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but now here we are 5 years later after everything, has been completely disrupted that people are like, yeah, well, whatever, as long as you do that. But the other thing, for brands out there, like anybody that's listening, like this is super important because I'm sure you're aware of it, but like you have to recognize that like brand loyalty just isn't really there. We don't
Yeah.
have that like physical interaction with you at like a store or
Mm-hmm.
an experience or anything. So like our experience is digital and it is through communication. It's through
Yeah.
this new medium. And so like it's never been easier to start up a new company like online, and it's never been easier for the consumer themselves to find another option. So
Mm-hmm.
like what separates you is how you communicate and how you create this experience for people, digitally without physically interacting them to like where they trust to put their money in you. And like, you're a marketer, you mentioned this, like if you're quick to call foul on yourself and you're like, here's a promo code, like you're also creating a little bit of like, brand, loyalty through that, because like now you've incentivized somebody to come back. And if that experience is good, then, everything's great, right? Like everything went off with a hitch. And then the last thing, remember brands like, I know that you are trusting a lot of your business to, or a lot of everything. Your experience is going through like carriers. But at the end of the day, like, that consumer did business with you, not with a
Yes.
carrier. You're doing business with a carrier. So if something goes wrong because of the carrier or the partner that you chose to represent your brand, remember that you chose them to represent your brand, and your consumer is going to be upset with you. They're not calling the carriers, they're calling you when they're upset. So take care of them. They'll be understanding. Trust me. I live in a house that is a ongoing like case study. I get to watch how like my wife Love her to death. Like, she is a great, like, firsthand witness of, like, somebody who does not live and work in the shipping world, and like how she operates, how she consumes. Like, oh, if I just get one more thing, I'm going to get free shipping. Like, we all know there's no such thing as free shipping. And I'm just like, this is really interesting. Like, you know, a scientist, like, writing things down and watching. If she ever listens to this podcast or watches me, she'll probably, like, you know, jab me in the side at some point. Why did you do that? But I love you, honey. It's great.
I throw my husband under the bus on my podcast all the time too. Poor guy. Being married to a podcaster, it's a risk.
So wrapping up, advice for shippers. I know I just kind of got on my soapbox and gave some advice there, but you know, I want to hear from you. You know, what's, you know, another piece of advice that maybe you'd give supply chain leaders, you know, as they're kind of heading into peak season? Are you feeling ready? Are you know, ready instead of reactive, I guess?
Yeah.
Let me know. Let's hear it.
Here's my advice. I end nearly everything I do with the same advice. Do one thing. You just listened to it. Jeremy had tons of great ideas. I shared tons of information out there. There were a lot of different things you could be doing. Pick one. So if your mind got triggered at the idea of like, I don't have great visibility, or maybe you were like, my forecasting, I just do it once a quarter, or whatever it is, pick one thing and actually implement it. Studies show if you could have written down, maybe you had feverish notes and you wrote down 83 things you could do today. Research shows you won't do them if you have a list of 83 things to do. If you have one thing you do, start with that. Start with your one thing, and you will actually be more prepared. You're already here. You're listening and watching. That means that you are an engaged and caring member of the logistics community. Do one thing. So pick one of the things that we mentioned today and go out and next week, you know, make a plan to implement something. So that's my advice. Pick something. Don't just listen and be like, oh yeah, that was some good advice, and then go about your life. Actually implement something.
It's a tiny little word, everybody. I had a professor that told me this. He's like, writes it really small on the board. He goes, it's focus. Mm-hmm. Focus, everybody. And you know what? If you haven't used AI, take those 87 things that you wrote down and put them into AI and have it prioritize on what you should focus on. Mm-hmm. What is the most important thing that you should look into given your situation?
Yeah, maybe let's look for an AI tool. Maybe it's use ChatGPT for your first time. Pick something. Make a change.
Right. That's right. It'll pay off. And trust me, if you don't have visibility, definitely get it. Don't be afraid of it, right? Like, that's kind of like the cartoon where they're sweeping all of the stuff underneath the rug, and now the rug is completely like mounded up. Like, you're gonna see some things that you don't want to see, and it's okay. Like, you just didn't know. But you got to start there. You definitely got to start there. Right. Lori, for folks who want to learn more from you, or you know, maybe EasyPost, where should they go?
Well, if you want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn. I love connecting with our viewers. As you mentioned, I host a podcast on Unboxing Logistics. We have a great community there that I really love. Would love to have you follow there. But if you're interested in learning more about EasyPost, we're a shipping solution that connects you through one API to all the different carriers and allows you to print your labels and do all your rate shopping and really just makes your shipping life really easy. Head on over to easypost.com. You can learn about us, but also in the resources section, I've put together a whole bunch of data and information on this upcoming peak season, including ebooks on how to get visibility, on how to manage micro surges, just all that latest data. So, you know, jump over there and educate yourself some more. And connect with me. I would love to meet other like-minded people.
Another analogy that I always use, anybody that's a football fan out there, you see the coaches with the play cards. They've got 40 seconds to make a decision for each and every play that goes out there. We are the system that puts those play cards together. So no matter what situation you get into, you know exactly what you need to do. You don't waste any time thinking about it. You don't throw your business plan away and everything goes in the garbage. You just focus on execution. So we give you that visibility. We give you that ability to plan for the uncertain things, and so that you can focus on executing and doing what is most important for your business. So check us out. You can find us at sifted.com. You can find me, jeremy.lee at sifted.com. My LinkedIn will be in the show notes. We'll also make sure that we drop some links in there for you, Lori. Don't be a stranger to us. Thank you so much for joining me today.